The story opens on a boy who looks ordinary at first glance. His name is Jin Seon. He lives in a nice home, studies with a private tutor, and has a father who's respected in public as a generous CEO. That picture cracks the moment the tutor steps out of the room and Jin quietly lifts a framed painting in the bathroom. Behind it, wrapped in bandages, rests a heavy mallet. The boy's hands shake for only a second, then his face empties, and the mallet falls. From the beginning, it's clear Jin doesn't live with a father. He lives with a predator. Dongsoo son, charming to the world, is actually a calculating serial killer who has long used his son to lure victims, cover trails, and serve as a convenient shield whenever police attention grew too close. The polite businessman and the monster can switch places in an instant, and the house itself feels built to accommodate both. The weight of all of this is stamped onto Jin's body. His left eye doesn't quite move like the right. Under his fringe, there's glass where an eye should have been, the result of a childhood accident that everyone around him accepts and he barely speaks about. It's a constant reminder that his life was shattered long before the story even began. School doesn't offer refuge either. Jin moves through the hallways, small and quiet, an ideal target for bullies. The boys who rule the social food chain amuse themselves by pushing him, pocketing his things, and reminding him that, in their jungle, he's prey. The world outside his house is hostile in a way many teenagers experience. The world inside his house is hostile in a way no teenager should ever have to survive. The first chapters establish a rhythm of dread. Missing women appear on the news. Jin records dates. The same dates line up too neatly with his father's business trips. The implication isn't spoken aloud, but the pattern is a confession by itself. The mallet behind the painting, the careful routines, the way Jin watches every adult in his life and calculates how to keep them safe from the man who smiles beside him at dinner. These are the tools he uses to endure. Jin isn't a hero yet. He's a survivor. And the story asks a simple, awful question. How long can a child remain an accomplice and still believe he's innocent?
She arrives like a small interruption, and then she refuses to leave his life. Her name is Kyun Yoon, a transfer student who doesn't know the school's hierarchies or the rules of staying invisible. She steps in when a beating crosses a line, calls an ambulance, and carries Jin into a world where someone might actually care if he lived. The kindness feels dangerous because kindness changes what can be tolerated. It introduces the idea that a life with air and light might be possible. Kyun has her own weight to carry. Debt pressed her family into desperate choices before she found steadier ground behind a convenience store counter. She smiles easily, but the story makes it clear the smile is something she holds onto, not something the world gave her for free. She and Jin meet between classes and corridors and unspoken truths. She teases him, he tells her to leave him alone. She apologizes and still stays near. The closeness grows in small human moments. And somewhere in those moments, Jin realizes a truth that makes his blood run cold. The women his father chooses always fit a pattern. Kyun matches too much of it to ignore. Jin begins to push her away harder, not out of cruelty but out of fear. He understands what his father does to people who become important to him. The irony is simple. The more he avoids her, the more the bullies circle back, and the more she steps in with a stubborn courage he doesn't think he deserves. The story makes a quiet promise here. If there's going to be a line where Jin stops serving his father's murders, that line will be drawn the moment Kyun is targeted.
Danger doesn't come only from the man in the suit. It comes from the periphery, from the places people assume are safe. A coworker at Kyun's store, a woman named Faye Kim, steps out of the shadows in the most mundane way possible. She works the same shifts, she stocks the same shelves, she smiles when Kyun arrives and chats about nothing at all. And when the storm finally cuts the power, Faye waits in the dark with a hammer. This portion of the story is suffocating in the best way. It takes the established fear of Dongsoo and complicates it. Faye has her own appetites. She abducts Kyun, and when Jin arrives hunting for her in the blacked-out aisles, she comes at him with the confidence of someone who's already decided how the night will end. She ties them, she taunts them, she tries to break them psychologically first, so the physical breaking will feel deserved. Jin falls back on whatever tools he has. He lies and he lies well. He uses Faye's vanity against her, plays for time, and when the moment opens, he cuts himself free with a shard of glass, moves fast, and takes the weapon away from her. He's seconds from killing to end the threat forever. Then he does what defines him for the rest of the story. He stops. He listens to the echo of Kyun's voice reminding him of who he wants to be, not who he was trained to become. He chooses restraint over revenge and calls the police. What matters most is not the capture. It's the way the ordeal resets Jin's resolve. Threats are now everywhere, not just under his roof. If he wants Kyun safe, he can't keep playing defense inside a system his father controls. He has to defy that system and accept the consequences.
School is introduced first as a jungle, and then as a map of recurring faces. Bo Park, a hyena who laughs when others bleed. Pan Han, a wolf who moves with his own ideas of loyalty. And Manny Kim, the lion at the top, a boy born with money and strength and a taste for dominance that everyone else calls charisma. Manny begins as a bully and a danger. Slowly, he shifts into something complicated and human. He watches Jin longer than the others. He notices inconsistencies that don't fit. He senses that the quiet boy owns a darkness deeper than fear. The arc turns when tragedy takes Manny's legs. The king of the school is forced into a wheelchair, and the loss peels him back to a person stripped of pride. He doesn't become gentle, he becomes sharper, angrier, and in a strange way, more honest. He draws closer to Jin not because they're friends in the soft sense, but because they understand each other in a hard one. Manny recruits help for the part they can't do alone. He finds Manduk, an imposing presence who knows how to follow without being seen. With new eyes on Dongsoo's movements, the kids dare to think they're finally pushing back. For a moment, they believe they have the advantage. The story lets them breathe, then tightens the rope.
Manjuk tails Dongsoo with professional patience, planting a tracker, noting addresses, and eventually slipping into the private apartment where the careful decor can't quite hide the trace of blood in the air. He relays what he sees, and the boys decide to confront the monster. They tie Dongsoo to a chair.
The scene should give them control.
Instead, it gives him the stage.
He doesn't rage or threaten, he talks.
He twists words and truths until Manny's grief and anger become tools in his hands.
He knows exactly which old wounds to touch. He knows how to make the boys doubt themselves. It's a masterclass in manipulation, and it takes place in a small room where the only law is who can keep their head when the air turns thin.
The confrontation spirals. Manny snaps and moves to end it. Manjuk tries to stop him, and in the confusion, a knife finds the wrong body.
Dongsoo waits for the second mistake, takes it, and turns the room into a crime scene that burns.
When the smoke clears, Manny and Manjuk are gone. Their deaths aren't treated as a twist. They're the natural consequence of underestimating a man who's turned deception into a vocation.
Investigators ask questions, and Dongsoo answers with sincerity so flawless it feels scripted. When pressed, he claims fear for himself and his son. He apologizes for delays. He promises cooperation. Under his palms, hidden from view, the smile flickers for a second. It's enough to understand the performance, but not enough to use in court. Jin does something radical. He begins to tell the truth where he can without signing his own death warrant. He confides in Kyun. He calculates which adult might believe him long enough to keep him alive afterward. He doesn't pretend bravery. He operates on dread, love, and a belief that what he's witnessed can't be allowed to continue, even if his own hands aren't clean. The writing grounds the thriller in the banality of evil. The killer doesn't stalk alleys every night. He holds meetings. He shakes hands. He makes sure his son's uniforms are pressed. He flickers between ordinary father and something that barely counts as human, in a way that makes the horror feel bigger than any single crime.
The climax doesn't arrive as a single fight. It arrives as a series of truths. Jin's childhood memories are unreliable. For years, he believed the scar in his life came from his father, throwing him off a hospital roof. The truth, when it returns, is more complicated and more devastating. His mother saw what he was becoming under his father's influence, and in a moment of panic and madness and love, she threw him. He survived. His mind protected him by twisting the memory into something bearable. This revelation doesn't excuse anything, it explains everything. Jin's hatred of his father has always been mixed with confusion about himself. Was there a monster under his skin, or only a wound? The answer is difficult and humane. He had been a child taught to be a weapon. Now he was an adolescent choosing to be a person. That choice doesn't erase the past, it gives the past somewhere to go. The final confrontation places father and son on the edge. Words become the last weapons. Jin demands an end. Dongsoo tests whether his son can be bent one more time. When he understands the boy in front of him would rather die than become his reflection, the man who engineered so many deaths makes a choice only he can make. He steps away from the world he controlled
and falls. Jin doesn't run. He doesn't pretend he was merely a witness. He walks into a police station and tells the truth. The law doesn't have a category for a child used this way. It has rules. He accepts the rules and serves time in juvenile detention. He reads a letter from Kyun. He smiles like a person, allowed to hope, rather than a person allowed to breathe. When he walks out, he goes to visit the woman who had been driven into madness by a reality no parent should ever have to see.
He stands beside Kyun at a hospital bed, and in that small, quiet place, the story finds the beginning of an answer. Recovery is not an event, it is a discipline.
Bastard doesn't close with triumph or fanfare. It ends in quiet survival. Jin and Kyun stand together in a hospital room, beside the mother who once tried to save her son the only way she knew how. The house with a hidden hammer is gone, but the marks it left remain. The story doesn't lie about that. Healing takes time. But it shows us the work has begun. That honesty is what makes Bastard unforgettable. It isn't about glorifying violence or leaning on shock value. It's about the long shadow of abuse, the way fear shapes a child, and the choices that can turn a victim into something more than a reflection of their abuser. Jin isn't perfect. He's frightened, dishonest, sometimes cruel, but his flaws make his better choices feel earned. Kyun isn't treated as a prize. She's his anchor, the one who shows him he can live differently. Manny and Manduk remind us not everyone makes it out. And Dongsoo's end proves that while monsters can fall, the systems that protect them don't simply vanish. In the end, Bastard refuses to offer clean justice. Instead, it offers something harder but more meaningful: survival, imperfect justice, and the possibility of healing. Survival is not purity. Forgiveness is not forgetfulness. Justice is not always triumphant, but choosing to keep living, to rebuild, and to resist becoming what hurt you, that is its own victory. And that's Bastard. Dark, heavy, and impossible to forget. Thanks for staying through this journey. Take a deep breath and let it settle in.